Okay, so Parshas Kisisa, this week's parsha, is a very, very, very loaded parsha. We have the sin of the Egel Azov, the golden calf, which is sort of the one of the the wrongdoings of greatest drama and magnitude in our history. As a Jewish people, I think it's fair to say it's the largest. There's another one that was, also of extreme consequence, which would have been eating fruit from the tree of knowledge. Anyway, so we have that. And this week's parsha is called Kisisa. Now, Sisa literally means you will lift up, you will elevate. And it's basically a term that refers to taking count. So Kisisa Yisroel b'nei Yisroel, when you will elevate the heads of the Jewish people, i.e. take notice, ask everyone to step up so we could count their heads, do a head count the number of Jewish people. Now, how were we counted in the desert? How was this count carried out practically? Excellent. Half shekel. Very good. So a shekel was like, the standard unit of currency. There were smaller units of currency like pennies or whatever, but that would have been, I guess, let's say the equivalent to $1-ish. In terms of the fact that there were smaller ones, but not really bigger ones. And each person who fit the criteria of being counted would give half a shekel, so a half shekel coin, to be collected. And once they were all collected, they would count the number of half shekel coins, and then they would know how many people there were who fit the criteria of being counted. And this is somewhat connected with the fact that last week on Tiny Esther we gave machatzis shekel to tzedakah. It's not connected to this event per se, but it's connected to the phenomenon that throughout the time of the Beis Hamikdash they would give machatzis shekel every year, like leading up from Rosh Chodesh Adar. The Beis Din and the leadership would start announcing that it's time for machatzis shekel, for everyone to give machatzis shekel, and the machatzis shekel was basically came together to create a communal fund which would pay for the communal karbanos throughout the year. So that would be, in the sacrifices that were brought in the Beis Hamikdash, the karbanos, there's what's called a karban sibur and a karban yachid. Karban yachid is an individual sacrifice, which is maybe a person sinned and needs to atone, whatever it is, just because they want to thank Hashem for something. So these are all different individual sacrifices, karbanos, that a person could bring on their own. Either they had to or they could choose to, depending on which it is. And then there's a karban sibur, which is a communal sacrifice, which doesn't mean that everyone in the community had to bring one. It means that one was brought on behalf of the community. I'm just going to turn the volume down. I need to leave it on. It's already down. It's already, sorry. Like, for example, the karban tamid, the ongoing sacrifice. There was one brought every single morning, 7 days a week, every single afternoon, 7 days a week. The morning karban tamid, the morning daily sacrifice, opened up the service in the Beis Hamikdash. Everything else happened after that. The afternoon one sort of signed off and concluded the daily service in the Beis Hamikdash. And that's what we daven Shachris and Mincha for, against those two, to commemorate those two karbanos. On Shabbos, Yom Tov, etc., there are musaf karbanos, additional karbanos for this big special nature of the day. And that's why we daven musaf on those days, to commemorate the karban musaf that would have been brought. So these are all communal sacrifices. There's one tamid in the morning on behalf of the entire Jewish people, one tamid in the afternoon on behalf of the entire Jewish people, one karban musaf brought on Shabbos and Yom Tov, etc. each. And each Shabbos and Yom Tov each has its own specific variation. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean one animal. It means one karban, because the Torah will say that this, karban is made up of such and such number of different animals, combinations, and there's different combinations for different days. So those are communal sacrifices, and the way that those were funded were money was collected from across the community equally. Everybody who fit the criteria And the criteria just included age and gender. It did not include financial well-being, etc. So it was a very, very universally evenly distributed collection. And that money, which was collected from a representative portion of the entire Jewish people, was then used to buy these korbanos. So each korban tamid was bought with money that was collected from everyone. So each korban belonged to everyone, was on behalf of everyone. So that's what the machatzis hashekel was used for throughout the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So it's another instance of the same thing of collecting machatzis hashekel during the Beis Hamikdash. It was used for these communal sacrifices. It was collected before Nisan, because the month of Nisan is the beginning of the count of months. Tishrei is the beginning of the year. Nisan is the beginning of the count of months. It's just one of those things. So that count happened before the month of Nisan. So that's what we brought the machatzis hashekel for last week, because it's almost the month of Nisan now. So, morning. It's okay. So, in the desert, the machatzis hashekel that was collected was used this instance. There were a number of instances of machatzis hashekel. This one, the primary function that's mentioned here in the pasuk immediately is counting people. And because we don't like to count people directly, because counting people, I would say bad luck. Luck is a too mundane or physical word, but maybe fortune is a little bit better. It can be a channel of bad things when people are counted. So instead of counting people, we had people who fit the criteria give a half a coin. We counted the half coins and we knew how many people there were. Then that was melted down and used to make the sockets the foundation of the Mishkan. So when the Mishkan was built, it was built out of wooden pillars, and each wooden pillar had a silver socket that it stood in. And those sockets were made out of these half shekels that were collected. So we have a very interesting medrash here that says, Kamin matbea shel eish hotzia kadosh baruch hu. So Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem tells Moshe that you're going to count the Jews and everyone's going to give a machatzis hashekel. And then Moshe's confused and is like, hang on, what's going on here? And so Hashem shows Moshe a vision of a half shekel coin made out of fire, a flaming half shekel coin. Well, it's not just a flaming coin, it's a coin that was made out of flame. A coin of flame, a half shekel coin of flame. Question is, what didn't Moshe understand? Like, had Moshe never seen a half shekel coin before? He was like, I don't know, what's a half shekel coin? And Hashem's like, here's what it looks like. Obviously, that's not the case. Moshe obviously knew what a half shekel coin was. And if he didn't know what a half shekel coin was, there was this very unnecessarily dramatic way of doing it, showing him a half shekel coin made out of flame in a vision. Not necessary. So obviously there's more going on here. So the question is, what was it that Moshe had a hard time understanding? And how was this vision of a half shekel coin made out of flame a resolution to Moshe's difficulty? So obviously the thing we need to address first is what did Moshe have such a hard time understanding? And what Moshe had a hard time understanding was that if you read the pasuk further, it says Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu that they're each going to give, when you count the Jewish people, they're going to be counted by giving a half shekel coin. And this half shekel coin will be kofer nafsho, will be a cleansing and a redemption for the soul. So now Moshe Rabbeinu is like, hang on a second. What does a half shekel have to do with cleansing of the soul? Like, how does that work? There was a rabbi, no, not a rabbi. There was once a Jewish kid and a Catholic kid, and they grew up in like a regional area. There were no private Jewish schools. There were no private Catholic schools, and they were both together in the public school. And most of the people in the school, in their class, they were in the same class. Most of the people in the class were completely secular. So you know, they both were given a hard time. They got to run from their money from the other kids for being, you know, religiously observant. And so they ended up sort of banding together and becoming really close friends, and they would have each other's backs and all of that, you know. And as they grew up, their friendship continued to, you know, get deeper and stronger, and they became closer and closer. And they finished high school, you know, they had to go further. So the Jewish kid went off to, you know, to yeshiva and to do smicha. And the Catholic kid went off to whatever seminary and became a priest. And then both of them were done, and, you know, he got his smicha and he was qualified as a priest. And they both, you know, they had a very strong connection to the town they grew up in. That happens often in regional areas with small populations. They wanted to go back and serve the communities they grew up with. So they both come back, and, you know, they meet each other again, and it's like been so long, and they, you know, get back together, and their friendship continues to become deeper and stronger and more complex, presumably a lot more complex. And, you know, this goes on for years and years. And then one day the Catholic priest calls up the rabbi and he says, listen, Moshe, I need a really big favor. Like, it's not such a big favor, but you're going to think it's a really big favor. I'm double booked tonight. I have to do confession for work, and I have a wedding. It's my sister's wedding. I can't miss it. You've got to do confession for me, please. And he says, well, I'm a rabbi. Like, we don't do confession. I don't know what it is. I've never done it before. It's not like a thing. How am I supposed to do confession for you? And he says, listen, trust me, it's really not a big deal. You come, you'll squeeze into the booth with me together. The confession starts at 8. I have to go to 8:15. I have to leave to the wedding. So come at 8 sharp. We'll squeeze in together. No one will know. They can't see. They're not going to look. We'll do the first few together. You'll get the hang of it. Trust me, it's going to be the easiest thing you ever did. And then you'll be fine. Time will run out. Everyone will be gone. You'll go home. No one's ever going to know the difference. So he says, you know what? For you, you know, we've been friends for 40 years. I'll do it. So they meet up together at you know, at 5 minutes to 8, and they squeeze into the booth. The people start lining up. 8 o'clock comes, and the first person comes along and says, you know, I did 4 sins this week. And so the priest says to him, you did 4 sins, give $2 to charity, and you'll be fine. And the rabbi's taking notes. It's like 4 sins, $2 to charity. Okay, yeah, I can do this. And it's like looking at his paper, and it's really nervous, and his hand's shaking. 4 sins, $2 to charity. And he's writing down, give $2 to charity and you'll be forgiven. Next guy comes past and says, I did 6 sins this week. And priest says, you did 6 sins this week, give $3 to charity and you'll be forgiven. And the rabbi says, you did 6 sins this week, give $3 to charity, you'll be forgiven. And on the side is making also a note of, like, you know, the cost sin ratio, and is like 4 sins, $2, 6 sins, $3. And the next person comes and says, yeah, I did 2 sins this week. And the priest says, you did 2 sins, give $1 to charity and you'll be forgiven. And the rabbi's taking his notes. And the priest says, okay, listen, I got to run. You'll be fine. You see, this is like, it's a piece of cake. So the rabbi says, okay, he's getting nervous, but, you know, he's you know, faced up to intimidating tasks before in this role. Fine. So the priest runs off, and the next person comes past and says, I did 1 sin this week. And so the rabbi looks at his chart and he says, 4 sins, $2, 6 sins, $3, 2 sins, $1. He says, this week's 2 for $1. Go do another one and come back and we'll talk. Right? I often tell this joke at the beginning of Yom Kippur. You know, the question is, what's up with this whole forgiveness thing? Like, do sins matter or do they not matter? If they don't matter, who cares? Whatever, you know, live a party and it's fine. And you just come and say, oh, I did these sins. I'll give some charity. I'll do teshuvah or whatever. And if they do matter, like, how does just like, oh, I'll do some teshuvah, I'll just give a half shekel coin to tzedakah, like what's going on? So we've got to understand the whole dynamic, what's happening here with teshuvah. So Moshe Rabbeinu is like wondering, you know, like a half a shekel, it's going to forgive people. The thing that's interesting is that Moshe Rabbeinu has been told earlier about forgiveness. He was told about all the karbanos, the sacrifices, and this sin is you know, atoned through this sacrifice, and that sin's atoned through that sacrifice. And Moshe didn't have any issues at that point. And he was probably like taking his notes and writing up his chart, and it was fine. Why is it that this time when Hashem says this is going to be kofer nafsho, this is going to be an atonement, all of a sudden he's like, hang on, like, what's going on? I'm completely lost. And Hashem had to give him this vision. And a big part of the answer to that is that this was a specific atonement for the Egel Azov, for the sin of the golden calf. Now, this is a whole different ballgame, right? It says in Kabbalah that Ramach, he put in the 248 commandments, the 248 obligations, mitzvahs aseh, aka positive commandments. I just don't like that word because what does that mean? It's like phylacteries. You only know what it means if you know what it means, in which case you don't need it anymore. Mitzvahs aseh are obligations, mitzvahs lo aseh are prohibitions. Some you have to do, some you're not allowed to do. So the 248 obligations, it says are the 248 Evarim de Malka. Now, generally speaking, the word Aver tends to be translated as limb, but that's not the correct translation of the word. Clearly, because it says the 248 mitzvahs are the 248 Evarim, and a healthy person doesn't have anywhere near 248 limbs. We have 4 limbs. We have 2 upper limbs and 2 lower limbs. So, you know, and obviously me being me, it's one of my pet peeves when people say 248 limbs. 248 body parts that I don't know that we have a term for that specifically refers to the way in which the body is categorized into 248 body parts, but as a system by which, you know, parts of the body are categorized into 248 separate groups or parts. So there's 248 body parts. Now, you know, getting an injury is always a bad thing. Not feeling well is always a bad thing. But that doesn't mean that all injuries are equal. You know, if someone gets like...
Sorry, pain is, no?
It can be, depending on what you mean. Not all pain is necessarily equal, but because pain is subjective, by definition, you can't necessarily define what pain someone's going to experience as a result of a particular injury. Is that what you mean?
I mean, like...
I mean, if someone stubs their toe or their arm gets cut off with a hacksaw, they're not going to experience the same amount of pain, right? As clearly evident by your current facial expression. Yeah, and why do people, you mean between people or between different things that happen to one person?
Like between people.
They do, and that's a waste of time because pain is subjective by definition.
Right. Yeah,
so comparing pain across people is just a conversation that doesn't even make any sense.
right.
But maybe with Neuralink, it'll become a possibility if we could experience each other's subjective experience. But anyways. So, right, clearly stubbing your toe, or if someone stubs their toe, they're not going to experience the same amount of pain as if they get their forearm sawed off with a hacksaw, God forbid. Sorry about that. Right? And neither of those are going to have the same impact on the person's life as if, God forbid, they get decapitated and the head gets cut off, right? Cutting off, I mean, I, cut off the tip of my thumb last week. I'm not going to show you because you probably don't want to see it, but yeah, it's fine. Okay, that's not the first time. You want to see it? I'll show you after class. You can come and have a look. It doesn't look as bad now because I already cleaned it all up, but it wasn't pretty. I've done it before. I have a number of fingers that you can see have been decapitated. Anyways, it's the cost of cooking. Back to the point. So the impact of cutting off the tip of someone's finger is not going to be the same on their life as cutting off their head, obviously, right? The tip of their finger, like, it'll hurt for a bit. It'll have, that tip of the finger will probably have some degree of reduced sensation forever, and it'll get a little bit better over time, but it'll never be the same as it was before. But it's not going to have the same functional effect on their life, obviously, as if the head gets cut off, God forbid, right? Clearly. And obviously there's a whole spectrum in between, but these are just the extremes to illustrate. And the same is true with mitzvahs. Not every mitzvah is the same. If each mitzvah is a varin de malka, these are the quote unquote, so to speak, body parts of the creator, or perhaps more functionally precisely, these are the body parts of the connection between us and the creator, right? If the connection between us and the creator if we think of it not just as one unified thing, but as, let's say, a rope, which is made up of a whole series of cables twisted together, for example, if each mitzvah is a strand in that cable, but let's imagine that some of those strands are like a 50th of an inch strand of yarn, and some of those cables are 1 inch thick cables of strands of steel. Not every thread in that cable is going to have the same impact if it's cut. Now, when Hashem gave the Torah, right, we have a pasuk. Excuse me, that says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe marasha kilas Yaakov. Right? Everyone familiar with the pasuk? It's the first of the 12 pasukim Mamar Chazal that we say. So let's have a look at that for a second. Let's break it down a little. And we are not going to dissect it because dissect is not a word, but we will dissect it. Moshe, we have Torah, Tziva, Lanu, Moshe. No, one second, I messed that up. Oh, someone cleaned the floor. Nice. Oops. So we have Torah, Tziva, Lanu, Moshe. What does that mean? Moshe commanded the Torah to us. Torah, Tziva, Lanu, Moshe, and Moshe commanded to us. Moshe kilas Yaakov. Now, the Midrash tells us that at Har Sinai, when we got the Torah, Hashem said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, which is the mitzvah to believe in Hashem. What happened? The experience of hearing Hashem's voice directly was so transcendent that our neshamas were like, whoa, Hashem, yay. And they all ran and left the bodies to go running for Hashem. And we all died. And then Hashem had to do Tchiyas HaMesim and bring us all back to life again. And then Hashem decided it would be a good idea to do it again. So then he said, Lo yeh lecha, you shall not have any other gods, which is the prohibition against idolatry. And what happened? We heard Hashem's voice, the neshamas went running, and we all died again. And then Hashem brought us back to life, and we were all just like, no, stop. Moshe, you go. Hashem could talk to you. You tell us what he said. So the first 2 mitzvahs we heard directly from Hashem. The next 611, because there's 613, the next 611 we heard from Moshe on behalf of Hashem. Numerical value of Torah, 400. Vav is 6. Resh is 200. Hey is 5. no, that doesn't work. 611. Torah, 611 mitzvahs, Moshe commanded to us, because the other 2 we heard directly from Hashem without Moshe as an intermediate. And there's a lot more to this. It's not just that this is the way it worked out. It's also the fact that these 2 mitzvahs, the mitzvah to believe in Hashem is the driving force behind the other 247 obligations. Every mitzvah, to say every obligation, is based off the obligation to believe in Hashem. Every single prohibition is based on the prohibition of not serving idolatry. Because at the end of the day, every transgression of any prohibition is, in a very subtle way, it is a very, very subtle iteration of idolatry. Because assuming that we know what we're doing wrong, because if I know Hashem says don't do this and I decide to do it, that means that I see my pleasure, I see my experience, I see whatever it is that motivates me to do this as more important than Hashem's prohibition, which means there's something that I value above Hashem, there's something I serve above Hashem, which by definition is in a very, very subtle iteration of idolatry. So Hashem told us these 2 mitzvahs because these 2 mitzvahs are the 2 general, all-inclusive mitzvahs that between them include the other 611. So once Hashem gave us, the 2 mitzvahs at the top of the 2 categories, then Moshe was able to unpack them and give us the rest of the other 611 that were extracted from those 2. Right? Because obviously faith in Hashem and not betraying our faith in Hashem by serving an idol is the foundation of everything. Right? And, whatever other mitzvah we might decide to choose, and I'm very, very hesitant to pick an example because that becomes very risky practically. Let me bring an example that's not going to be risky right now. Hopefully it should be risky very soon. Mitzvah Hashem. Let's say that someone in the time of the Beis Hamikdash is able to go to Yerushalayim. There's a mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel. There's a mitzvah of everyone who lives in Eretz Yisrael to go to the Beis Hamikdash on the Shalosh Regalim, on Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos, and brings particular korbanos. And someone doesn't go. That's an Aveira, because they had an obligation to do it. Is the impact of that Aveira on their connection and relationship with Hashem the same as like explicit, literal idolatry? Obviously not. Right? Stubbing someone's toe is not the same as cutting off their head. Explicitly, literally serving an idol, worshipping an idol, is the equivalent of cutting off the head of our connection to Hashem. It's like, you know, taking the jaws of life and chopping through the whole cable and just cutting the whole thing. So now Moshe Rabbeinu is really baffled. Someone did this Aveira, you can repair it. You broke that strand, you can fix that strand. A different strand, if someone took jaws of life and severed the whole cable and their whole connection to Hashem is like, boom, they like worshipped an idol, which is the mother of all transgressions, then could there be any atonement for that? That's what Moshe was confused about. And so Hashem responded and says, I understand your confusion. Here's the answer. The answer is a half shekel coin made of fire. Now we understand, right? Yeah, good. Okay, you're actually listening. Baruch Hashem. So we understand what Moshe's problem is. We have no idea what the answer is still. So, so there are a few things that are happening here. Number one is that we have a half shekel coin and the fact that it's fire. And each of these is obviously relevant. So there's something about a half shekel that is going to be very relevant to the atonement for idolatry. And there's something about the flame that's going to be very relevant to the idolatry. And so there's a metaphor that's given for this, or an analogy is probably a better word than metaphor. May or may not come from the Baal Shem Tov. There are indications that it's from the Baal Shem Tov, but then I don't know how reliable they are. Of a person who is an apprentice smith. So he's learning how to work metals, how to work gold and silver. And, you know, he spends a few years working really hard, and he learns how to pour the metal, and he learns how to mold it, and he learns how to hammer it, and he learns how to quench it. I mean, you quench steel. I don't know if you quench gold and silver. I have no idea. But, you know, he learns the whole process. And when it comes to hammering, it's not just learning the skill. It's building up the physical strength to lift a hammer that's heavy enough to hammer out a metal, and to lift it up repeatedly and to hammer the metal, you know, dozens or hundreds of times over. So there's skills being built up. He's learning the minutiae of the whole thing, how it works, building up the strength for years and years and years. And he's learned the whole thing, and he's ready to go out on his own. You know, his level of skill and achievement has basically achieved that of his teacher. So he might as well go out on his own, and instead of being paid an apprentice wage, he can run his own business and get paid, you know, the full value of the work he's doing. So he decides to do that. And, you know, he gets a property, he gets a loan to buy a smithy. And he goes in and he buys up some raw gold and silver and gets ready to start doing the work. And he puts the gold and silver into, you know, whatever the thing is that they use to melt it. And he's like sitting there watching. It's not melting. It's not melting, and it's not melting. And he knows that whenever he put the metal, the gold or the silver in whatever it's called, it's something with a C, crucible maybe? Yeah? The gold and the silver in the crucible in the shop where he learned to work, it would melt within, you know, half an hour, now, whatever it is. Nothing's doing it. So He's very embarrassed because he, just basically told his teacher, like, I'm done. I don't need you anymore. I'm going out on my own. Now he has to come back to the teacher and say, like, what's going on? My metal's not melting. And so the teacher says, well, why is it not melting? I have no idea. So he says, you know what? You're a good student. I think it's fair that you went on your own. No hard feelings. Let me come and have a look and see if I can figure out what you're doing wrong. And he walks in. He bursts out laughing because the guy never lit a fire under the crucible. He learned how to melt it, how to purify it, how to clean it, how to pour it, how to mold it, how to hammer it, how to do everything, how to design it, how to etch it, how to engrave it, everything he learned. But he was never tasked with the responsibility to light the fire under the crucible because, the owner, the boss came in first and lit the fire so things could get started. And with all his advanced expertise in every other part of the process, he just, as ridiculous as it sounds, didn't know that he had to light a fire under the crucible. And obviously he had nothing because without fire, there's no melting and there's no process and there's no nothing. And we have the same thing here. Not literally, but to a degree. Because a person can live a life in which they do all the mitzvahs, can live a life in which they do everything right, and it's all cold as ice. They have no personal connection or relationship with Hashem. They have no emotional involvement whatsoever. It's all just technical, and they're satisfying their obligations. And the whole thing is like one big iceberg.
Oh, what?
Iceberg. It's just cold as ice. Now, to be clear, the fact is that mitzvahs ultimately boil down to the action. Either someone did the mitzvah or they didn't. Right? If a person puts on tefillin with the intent to fulfill the mitzvah and doesn't know anything about the tefillin, doesn't know anything about, the unity in Hashem and anything else, and just says, this is a mitzvah, I want to do it. They can't read Hebrew, nothing. They don't even say the bracha and they don't even say Shema. They literally just have someone ties the tefillin on their hand, but they agreed to do it with the intent to do the mitzvah. They fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin 100%. And if someone studies the Kabbalah and the Pnimiyas Torah and the mysticism, and they meditate about Hashem's unity and the tefillin and everything else, and they reach a state of transcendence where, they get hit by a kid on a bike at full speed. I was going to say truck, but then they probably won't be aware of anything. And they don't even feel it because they're in such a state of transcendence from their meditation. Not to confuse that with Transcendental Meditation, which is not kosher.
Why?
I don't know the details, but it is allegedly very not kosher.
Really?
I could find you some sources,
Please.
specifically Transcendental Meditation. Apparently, it's very halachically problematic.
I feel like that's where I got wrong in my meditation, because I practiced checking.
I didn't know much about it at all, but apparently
access that tell us, but through the other source.
Could be. Right, and this person meditates about Hashem's unity and the meaning of tefillin and everything else, but they never put on the tefillin. 0% mitzvah of tefillin. So this is the fine print we need to know first, that the mitzvah ultimately boils down to the action. That being said, you can't compare an action that's done cold as ice to an action that's done on fire with passion. And so what Hashem was showing Moshe was that the correction, the way to really correct the damage, because what was the damage that was done? The damage that was done was they came with jaws of life from the emergency services and just sliced through the entire cable, because that's what Avodah Zarah, literal, explicit Avodah Zarah is that. Slicing the whole connection to Hashem in half and destroying the whole thing. And so Hashem's telling Moshe that the key to correcting that is fire, is passion. And the truth is, I think if you think about it in terms of a literal interpersonal human relationship, for Avodah Zarah, yeah. Now, it's also going to be true that if this is the thing that corrects for Avodah Zarah, it's certainly going to be good for things that are less. But this is kind of the only thing that's big enough to correct for Avodah Zarah. It's not that it's only good for Avodah Zarah, not for other things. It's that for Avodah Zarah, this is the only thing that's good enough. And it's only Avodah Zarah that this is the only thing that's good enough for. But it's also, obviously, if it's good for that, it's going to be good for other things too. Now, and the truth is, I think we'll see that in the analogy also that I'm about to draw. So, relationships between people, like, you can really care about someone and also like really, really, really mess up your connection with them. Like, we're human. We could get distracted. We could lose focus. We could do something that sends someone the message that as much as we claim to care about them, they actually don't mean anything to us at all because we've gone and done something that basically completely severs our relationship and our connection. And you could imagine that restoring that damage, and there could be countless different examples of, how this could be done. Especially across different kinds of relationships. But, for like a third grade kid, it might be like having a play date with another friend and not inviting the friend that, thinks they're your best friend. Rabbi, that should be the worst thing anyone ever does to someone, but what's that? That's why I said with a third grade kid. So Halavai, if only that should be the worst transgression anyone ever does against a friend. Or loved one. So, right, so when we do something, a person can do something that... So we're going there. So a person can do something that's going to be catastrophic to their relationship with someone or their connection with someone. That doesn't necessarily have to be terminal. There are countless instances of people who have done catastrophic damage to their relationships and have restored them and built them back better than they ever were. But that's not an easy thing to do, to say the least, right? Doing that requires extreme commitment, extreme dedication. You have to be 100% bought in. And if we think about it, what's the thing that you have to be 100% bought into? The thing that someone who did catastrophic damage to their relationship has to be 100% committed and bought into is their commitment to this person. That's the foundation. And the person has to decide that every thought that I think and every word that I speak and every action that I do is going to illustrate and express how important this person is to me and is going to illustrate my passion and love for this person. And over time, all of those thoughts and words and actions will build up and we'll start to rebuild that rope. We'll start to rebuild that cable. But it's not actually the actions themselves per se that are restoring the cable. I mean, it's the actions that are doing it. But the reason the actions are restoring the relationship one little bit at a time is because these actions are expressions of the connection that really is there. And the only way to restore that connection after catastrophic damage is there and really is there in a very, very substantial and more than substantial, in a major way. And to make sure that that's expressed on a very, very regular basis. And the more catastrophic the damage, the more frequently that commitment and relationship and love and connection and passion has to be expressed before it can start to make progress. Does that make sense? So for a person to sit there and say, oh, I love them so much, I love you so much, I love you so much. You know what's going to happen when the person hears you say that? They're going to roll their eyes and say, yeah, I've heard you say that before. Thank you very much. But your actions speak louder than your words. So in order to actually communicate the love that you do have for them and the connection that you do have with them, you need actions to illustrate that and to demonstrate it again and again and again and again. So it's the actions that are technically doing the damage repair, but the reason the actions are doing the damage repair is because actions speak louder than words, and these actions are illustrating the connection that you do have. Every time you put them first, and every time this person puts the one they've hurt first, and every time they, show that the other person is more important than they are, and they put their own needs down and put the other person's needs first again and again and again and again and again, eventually the other person's going to start to feel that message that say, you know what, this person really is committed to me. They really do care about me. They really do love me. They messed up. Now that's a process. But it's not the actions that are repairing the damage. It's the actions that are illustrating the connection, which is what repairs the damage. Right? So to repair the damage of severing the connection is the thing that repairs that is a new and improved connection. It's just that you have to, the way that works is that it's illustrated with actions. So Hashem's telling Moshe Rabbeinu, yeah, they messed up bad. They messed up real bad. They got jaws of life and severed the whole cable of their connection with me. They cut off the head. They killed it. It's gone. Which means that if they want to restore it and they want to do damage control, it's going to take fire. It's going to take a fiery, passionate love for me on their part to be able to damage control what they've just done. So this is how the first part of how this was a response and a resolution to Moshe's issue. Because Moshe's issue was that he was wondering, how it could possibly be that giving a half coin could be a resolution for such a transgression, for decapitating or completely severing our connection with Hashem. And the answer that Hashem gave, part one, was, yeah, you messed up. It's going to take fire. It's going to take a fiery, passionate love and connection for this to be able to be damage controlled. So that's why the response was this half shekel coin of fire. Well, that's why the vision, the half shekel coin in the vision was made of fire. But why a half shekel coin? Like, why not just like a flame? Or like a soul on fire, or I don't know, some other, vision involving fire rather than a half shekel coin on fire. Now, obviously, we were talking about the issue at hand literally is a half shekel coin, but that Moshe's issue was never the half shekel coin. He knew what that was. His issue was the resolution of the problem. So why did Hashem show the fire in the form of a half shekel coin? And this is going to be another whole part of the picture that's independent of the first part. So really, this half shekel coin of fire is bringing together they're not really two separate things. They're two separate parts of the picture, and we'll bring it all together. So when the Torah tells us that the resolution is by bringing a half shekel, it goes on to elaborate and says that a shekel is 20 gera. Gera is the next tier down, the next denomination, the lower denomination of the currency. So I guess gera would be a nickel. Nickel's 5 cents, right? I always still confuse dimes and nickels. Nickel's 5 cents. So a gera, let's say, would be like a nickel. It's a 20th. A gera is a 20th of a shekel. So the Torah says there are 20 gera in a shekel, you should give a half a shekel. It's like, thank you for the math class, right? We needed Hashem to tell us that. Now, Hashem wasn't talking to like a 5-year-old kid who's learning about currency in school, and he was trying to reinforce it. He's talking to Moshe Rabbeinu, who knew how many gera there were in a shekel, and therefore was able, being not the least mathematically capable of individuals, was able to calculate for himself that half a shekel is going to be 10 gera. So why is Hashem like rubbing this into his face? It's like a gera. You have to give a half shekel coin. A shekel is 20 gera, so you're going to give 10 gera, half a shekel. Now, obviously, there's something to it, right? And the answer here is the reason Hashem chose to elaborate about the the nature of the currency and the fact that they're 20 gera in a shekel and 10 gera in a half shekel is the same reason why the vision wasn't just a flame, but it was a half shekel coin of flame. And that was because this is the key to the flame. The half shekel is the key to the flame. If we want to be passionate, have fiery passion for Hashem, which is going to be that which repairs the catastrophic damage that we did with the Egel Azav, the pathway to achieving and generating that fiery passion is the 10 gera of a half shekel, with a full shekel being 20 gera. You should be a little bit lost at this point, and hopefully that will change shortly. Is that clock right? No. There's something up with clocks right now. Every clock that I've encountered for the last week has been off by 1 to 3 minutes. In every classroom that I teach in, the clocks are off, my watch is off, assuming that my phone is right, which is an assumption that may or may not be correct. Anyways, sorry. So what do we know about the structure of the neshama, of the soul? 10 what? Does a soul have spheres? 10 koiches. They do, which is a whole conversation that we've probably had and that I would love to have again. It's like one of my favorite things to get carried away with. It's fascinating and very deep. And I'm going to exercise a huge amount of restraint and not do that right now.
Why do it?
We'll be here till tomorrow when we have 7 minutes. No, we're not getting to that. We're talking about Chachma B'Nedas Chesed V'Rut Tiferes Netzach Yisod Malchus. So there are 10 koiches. And the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya that each one of these neshamas, and he's talking there about the Ruach Neshama Chai Yechido, each of these levels has 10 koiches, Keneged Esa Spheros Elyonis, that correspond to the 10 spheros in the worlds above, Shenishtalshel Mehem, from which they evolved or developed. So they have the same names because they're very closely related, and they are a result of a developmental process by passing through those olamas and experiencing those spheres. And I do that especially all the time, and at least 19 out of 20 times people get it wrong and say spheros, because it is very, very confusing unless someone has made it clear for someone before and explicitly had this conversation. They get used very sloppily. And I don't mean in the texts, I mean in the people who talk about them, and people use them interchangeably. Often teachers do it, so it's not anyone's fault who makes that mistake, but it is, good for it to be corrected. So every nefesh has 10 koiches. Chachma B'Nedas Chesed V'Rut Tiferes Netzach Yisod Malchus. Now, Hashem's message to Moshe was that if you want to have the flame, you get there with a half shekel. A full shekel is not 10 gera, it's 20. 10 gera half shekel is the key to the fire. What is our complete identity? Our complete identity is when we are one with Hashem. The 10 koiches of the nefesh, the 10 spheres of Hashem, 10 and 10, is a shekel, 20 gera. 10 koiches, 10 spheres, us and Hashem together, that's a complete unit, just like a whole shekel. And the Torah says a shekel is 20 gera. Half a shekel is 10 gera. The 10 koiches of the nefesh are only half of the picture. Gera is I don't know how you say it, a 20th of a shekel. זה מטבע ש20 גרה ביחד זה שקל. זה מסתם זה אגורה מגיע מגרה. גרה זה היה בזמן, אבל אגורה יש 100 בשקל חדש, נכון? כמה אגורות יש בשקל חדש עכשיו?
כן, 100.
Right, אבל יכול להיות שהמילה מגיעה מגרה, אבל זה היה 20 גרה בשקל, לא 100. וזה אותו עניין,
כן.
רק סכום קצת אחרת, או שווי קצת אחרת. אחרת, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyways, so, and this was Hashem's message. Hashem's message to Moshe was, you're right, you guys messed up. You killed the whole thing. You killed your whole connection with me. No, not Moshe Rabbeinu, but everyone else, excluding the tribe of Levi, which is why the tribe of Levi ended up serving in the Beis Hamikdash. The original plan was for the firstborn of each family to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. The original Kohanim was supposed to be the firstborns of every family, which was kind of an exchange for the fact that Hashem spared the firstborns of every family during Makas Bachos when he killed the firstborns of the Egyptian families. So it was both a responsibility and a privilege. Now they got it at that point, I guess, in that equation, it's more emphasizing the responsibility aspect, but because it was also a big privilege when, the firstborns of the common families were involved in the Egel Azov and making the golden calf, they lost the opportunity, the right to that privilege, and it was given to the tribe of Levi, which includes Kohanim. So Kohanim are a family, a subset within the tribe of Levi, because the tribe of Levi wasn't involved at all. So
he's like, I'm not getting involved.
and just like it was then, that's usually a wise decision. Not getting involved in most things is almost always a wise decision, unless it really is important. Now, so how can we repair that damage? To repair the catastrophic damage we did to our connection, our relationship with Hashem, step one is to recognize that we on our own are only half. Our nefesh has 10 koiches. And 10 koiches do make up a whole nefesh. But a whole nefesh is only half a unit. 10 gera make up a half shekel. And a half shekel was a coin, right? It's not like they brought 2 quarters. They brought a half shekel coin. There was a coin in currency called a half shekel. A half shekel was a unit of currency, which is why when it comes to the mitzvah minhag, whatever you'd call it, of doing machatzis shekel today, which we did last week, right? In order to do it properly, in Australia, there are 50-cent coins. So 50 cents is half of a dollar. So they do 50-cent coins. But here, there is no 50-cent coin. There's a dollar note or a dollar coin, which is less common in circulation. And there are quarters. Now, there were half-dollar coins in circulation at one point, which is why when people do machatzis shekel, they'll go to a shul or to some organization that has half-dollar coins to use them, because it's not just the value of half of a dollar. It's an actual half-dollar coin as a unit of currency, a half-dollar. Because the neshama is an entity in and of itself. It's a 10 koyach, a 10 ability structure. It's an entity that has 10 koyches in its structure. That being said, a $half is a unit of currency, but its name is $half. That's what it's called. Like, that's literally what the $half coin says on it here, not in Australia, which is why technically here, it's actually better for the mitzvah. We're better off here because the currency literally says $half on it. In Australia, it doesn't say $half, it just says 50 cents, which is a lot better than giving, 5 10-cent coins. There are no quarters there, or 2 20s and a 10.
Actually, sometimes like very rare for coins, it says $half here.
Right, that's what I'm saying. In Australia, they don't have it. It just says 50 cents. But here, there are $half coins, and doing that is fulfilling the mitzvah in a better way than doing just a 50-cent coin that doesn't say $half on it, because it's machatzis shekel. It's a half a shekel. It's a half of the basic unit of currency. So if it says $half, that makes it ideal. And we have two things that are true at the same time. It is a $half, which is a unit of currency, or it was when that was, used. And as long as you can get hold of it, it still technically valid unit of currency. But it's a unit of currency whose name implies that it's half of the real complete unit of currency, which is $1. And Hashem says, you want to repair the catastrophic damage, you've got to recognize and appreciate and then exemplify the fact that your neshama is 10 geira. You have 10 koichos. 10 geira is half of a complete unit. A complete shekel has 20 gera. Every one of you is only ever complete when the 10 koichos of your soul come together with the 10 spheres of Elokus of godliness. When your 10 koichos and the 10 spheres of godliness come together, you have 20. 20 gera is a shekel. And that's why Hashem emphasized that. He says, you want to repair the damage? Keep in mind, 20 gera is a shekel. Each of you is bringing a half shekel. And that's why the resolution to Moshe's confusedness was Hashem telling him, showing him a half shekel coin of flame. Hashem's telling him, the moment you realize and appreciate in a real, personally authentic way. Personally authentic is like, it's so cliche today, but like it became cliche because it works. Like that's how all cliches work. It's such a shame that they ruin everything. But in a way that's like a experientially real appreciation for the fact that your 10 koichos are like the 10 gera of a half shekel, and a full shekel is 20. You are complete when your 10 gera come together with the 10, when your 10 koichos come together with the 10 spheres of Hashem, like the 20 gera of a full shekel. That recognition of the fact that you are only true when you are one with Hashem, that is going to light you on fire and make you passionate about your connection with Hashem. And that's how you repair the damage. And the truth is that this really actually relates, I think, very strongly, to the analogy that we were talking about in an interpersonal relationship. Right? What does that person want to know? The person who got hurt catastrophically in their relationship wants to know that the other person feels that they can't survive without them. They don't just want to know that they like them, that they enjoy spending time with them, because that's not enough right now. I don't care. That's very nice. Too bad. They want to know that this person cannot survive without them. They want to know that this person's love for them is so great that they will always be complete without them. And the way that they are going to, only way they'll ever believe that after the catastrophic damage to the relationship is when that person shows it with action repeatedly. But the thing that's repairing the damage is not the actions. It's the passionate connection and the sense of incompleteness that is expressed through those actions. The actions are the language that expresses the love and connection and incompleteness without the other person. And it's the exact same thing here. Hashem says, know that a real shekel is 20 and 10's only a half. Your nefesh has 10 koichos. Without Hashem, you're only half. You're not complete. You're only complete when we are together. And the moment that that becomes truly real to you personally and experientially, that will light you on fire. You will have a half shekel, 10 gera coin of fire. And that's how you will be able to begin the process of repairing the damage, this catastrophic damage. L'chaim.